And I'll just talk about within the short story itself, because I think, if I go back and I look back at the first short stories that I was really reading, again, I said Hemingway was the gateway drug. But that kind of led me to discover other things while I was in college. For example, when I was there, that's when this book came out for the first time. Drowned by Junot Diaz. What an amazing collection of stories. I didn't know you... this was like 1997 or something like that. Anyways, in many ways, I still think it's his best book. What we talk about when we talk about love, Carver, man... And everybody says this is actually Lish's book. But, I mean, I have gone through and done the exercise where you hold up his story against Lish's edits, and you just see what Lish cuts. It's amazing. I'm on the camp that says that the Lish edits are better. So because of what they cut away, and like I said, the feel of all that negative weight in there. So this was a huge influence to me. Also, about that same time, kind of keeping with the dirty realists, I discovered this book and this writer, In the Garden of North American Martyrs by Tobias Wolff. Most people will know him for like the memoirs, right? You'll know him for This Boy's Life, but this collection is out of this world, amazing. And then around the same time, because it was just such a huge part of the conversation and has been such a tremendous influence on writers ever since. In fact, you can't open up an issue of the Paris Review without reading a story that's not just basically Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. Everybody loves this book. This is, and rightly so. The work in here is absolutely amazing. Visionary, very different, but you can definitely feel that influence in many, many writers I know today. But it wasn't until I became kind of mired in the craft. I was searching around trying to find my own masters, the ones that I was really going to take direction from, that I discovered my first teacher. Or not my first teacher, that's the wrong way to say. The man who's been probably the biggest mentor to me in my professional writing life, which is Jim Shepard. I'll have two of his collections here that I think are out of this world. And he has been a tremendous influence on the way that I think about how stories are shaped, and what they can do. He, like you were saying earlier about nonfiction, the way that my story sort of took on a non-fictional take. I mean, a lot of that comes from an indebtedness to Jim and the way that he writes. He does tons and tons and tons and tons of research. You open up the back of this book, you'll see an acknowledgments page that goes on for 3 pages about all the volumes he did in reading about the history of volcanology in Krakatoa, in Indonesia or something like that, in order just to write one story. He immerses you in something. And I think that he continually sets that up as the drama of a piece. But what he has always sort of rightfully pointed me towards was that a drama is not a story. Conflict is a story, and conflict is always very personal. So putting those two forces in motion in a story, I think, is incredibly powerful. And I'm indebted to this collection, like you'd understand anyways, as well as So You Think That's Bad. Those are wonderful, wonderful books. And then there are other masters who, I keep kind of continually discovering and coming into awe with, like Adam Johnson, Fortune Smiles, which won the National Book Award a few years ago. Adam Johnson is a wonderful writer, one of my favorites writing today. Samantha Hunt, this book, which is very recent, The Dark Dark. It's amazing. Even, I don't think there's a single collection here where I would say every story is perfect for me. as an individual reader. But I always admire when, like, there's always several stories in a collection that just take your breath. And then the ones that maybe they don't work for you so much, you still admire the fact that they're really reaching for something. They're grasping, they're trying, they're pushing the form, they're doing something daring and innovative. And I feel that that's definitely true with Samantha's book. That's pretty wonderful. Lucia Berlin, the Manual for Cleaning Ladies. This is a leg. There's some really wonderful stuff. She's a very unknown, underappreciated writer in her lifetime who's just been sort of rediscovered. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose I also have to talk about all the war story, the war story writers, going back, well, you could go further back, but I think the one that my generation of writers is always coming back to is Tim O'Brien. And even though The Things They Carried is a wonderful collection, I personally still prefer going after Cacciato, his 1979 novel. But this is an amazing book. Mine's signed.
Oh.
He's got it.
Mine is too.
Yeah, but he misspelled my name, but it's okay.
It's all right. He called me Eric.
and then this book, which won the National Book Award a couple years ago, by Phil Cly. It's a great collection. So I feel to a degree that I am kind of in conversation with a bunch of writers who, this book, and I think one that's just about to hit, called Bring Out the Dog by Will Mackin, are the two finest collections of short stories by Iraq War writers that are out in the last 10 years, sort of beginning to grapple with the material of this collection. I also know Phil. I've had beer with him. We've talked, and he's a great guy. So I was really pleased that his collection did so well. I think Will's collection is also going to be one to read and ponder over. And then, who knows, maybe someday I'll have something to add to. I'm working on it. A writer's primary education is reading.
Yeah.
You do two things. You spend time with your butt in the chair, trying to work it out and making a lot of mistakes and failing and just futzing with your sentences and trying to pull something together. And you spend a lot of time reading. There is no other way to learn. You can go to workshops, you can go to Iowa, you could go to any one of these top MFA programs. There's no guarantees that you're going to leave that with a book contract or a life in writing. It all comes down to how you read and what you're willing to take away from those who have an example for you, your engagement with it. I feel like all my stories, in a way, are dialogues with other stories. That's, to me, like a requirement of literary fiction, is that in some way you're thinking about another story and it triggers something. Havoc, for example. I think I talked about this in my interview with NER, came from, its genesis was something that was said in a seminar when we were reading a story by Turgenev called Moo Moo. And the professor's observation that people tend to feel sorry for animals more than they feel sorry for people in stories. And I thought that was a really interesting observation. And I had just read, sometime later, the lead story in Phil's book called Redeployment, which is about a guy who comes home after the Iraq War, and he's sort of confronted by the sight of his old family dog that's basically on its last leg, and it triggers for him all these memories about being in Iraq. It's a poignant story, and it was a great kickoff to the collection. It was first published in Granta, I believe, in 2011. And I kind of wanted to do something similar, but I felt intimidated after Phil's story came out. And then I think after casting around for a while, I began to toy with a story about, my particular Iraqi experience with those dogs, which are these unit mascots that we had these strays that are everywhere, and units or American soldiers kind of picking them up and trying to essentially make them into pets. When because we look at it through our lens, we say, "Oh, there's the dog. We love dogs," and the Iraqis won't touch them because in the Islamic faith, dogs are hadith. They are considered dirty. They're considered harbingers of evil spirits. So that's why they won't allow them into their homes or do anything like that. So I kind of wanted to play with all those things, and the chance to sort of, and at least in my mind, have a dialogue with those stories. My first story was a dialogue with Bartleby the Scrivener. A story I've been just working on is sort of a conversation with Kipling, as well as Deborah Eisenberg. I'm always, I think, thinking about other stories when I'm writing my stories. It helps me feel connected and alive in the process of writing.